This episode of You Should Hear This is sponsored by Visit Evansville. Events, culture, world-class venues, and accommodations. It's all within reach in Evansville, Indiana. Bursting from the bend of the Ohio River on the southern tip of the state, Evansville has all the amenities of a big city while offering a unique blend of Hoosier hospitality and Southern charm. Evansville is conveniently located near several metropolitan cities, so we're easy to get to. Think big city adventures without the big city hassle. With 45 unique meeting and event facilities and over 3,900 sleeping rooms, we're the perfect destination for your next meeting or convention. Connectivity is effortless with Old National Events Plaza, the Ford Center, and the full-service Doubletree Hotel by Hilton Skybridge Connection, providing everything you need under one roof. Downtown Evansville boasts over 850 sleeping rooms, so your event and conference hotel needs are all served within 7 blocks of Old National Events Plaza. Looking for something to do at the end of the convention day? Evansville offers over 25 museums and art galleries, along with local nightlife, eateries, and breweries to satisfy even the most adventurous foodie or particular conventioneer. Budget still recovering from lost revenues throughout the pandemic? The Visit Evansville sales team offers exclusive incentives to all ISAE members. Submit your next RFP at visitevansville.com and let us welcome you to our bend on the Ohio. Hello, and welcome to You Should Hear This, a podcast for the Everyday Association professional. I'm Nick Estrada, your host. The current job market is competitive, and although there are opportunities to leave your current role for another position, that's not always the decision that we all want to make. Perhaps we'd like to stay where we are, but with some increased responsibilities and opportunities, or potentially an increased salary or benefits. However, approaching these conversations can be awkward. Where do you start? What do you say? Should you have a presentation as to why you deserve the promotion? These are all great questions that we think of when approaching the promotion conversation. And our guest today, Chris Price, will be able to assist with answering some of these questions and how we can approach them. Chris Price is a partner at Mattison, where his leadership and fun-loving attitude keep nonprofit associations thriving. Describing each day as a new adventure, he takes pride in helping clients fulfill their missions, and under his leadership, nonprofit clients have experienced substantial growth, as has Mattison. Before joining Mattison, Chris worked in the construction and civil engineering fields. He currently serves as president for the Indiana Construction Roundtable and the Indiana Construction Roundtable Foundation. He's also currently involved with workforce development programs supporting the hospitality sector. Outside of work and philanthropy, Chris enjoys spending time with his wife, Stephanie, and their 3 sons. And when he can get a break, you can find him on the golf course. Welcome, Chris.
Hey, good to be here.
Glad to have you today to talk through what can sometimes maybe be a little bit of an awkward conversation.
For sure.
I think for both parties. But before we dive into that conversation, I know we talked a little bit in the intro, just a little bit about your background, but mind telling us a little bit more about your journey and kind of how you've gotten to where you are today?
Yeah, I'm originally from Indiana, from Brownsburg. I kind of came to the nonprofit industry in sort of a weird way, and then I'm really a construction professional. So after high school, I went to Purdue and became a civil engineer and moved to Texas for like 6 years there in kind of the civil sector, but in more of a sales role, and moved back to Indiana in 2015, where I continued working in construction for another 3 years. 2005 to 2008 was when I was working in the industry. And if y'all remember 2008, that was a rough year, and that was when the recession hit, but it particularly hit the construction industry hard. And that year was just a really tough year for me professionally. And I had a conversation with my uncle around that time who owned Mattison, and he was interested, and he was getting up in years and interested in succession planning. It was a small company with like 4 employees. And he basically said, if you're interested in coming on board, we've got some opportunities for growth. And if you can really kind of prove yourself as a leader and succeed in the company, you've got a chance at owning the business, when I go to retire. So he just happened to catch me at a really good time in my life. And I was willing to kind of take that gamble and make the jump over to Mattison. And yeah, haven't looked back since. And in 2010, Scott Grimes and I were able to buy the business, and yeah, the rest is history. So kind of came to this in a unique way.
Yeah. But I think we all do, right? We all kind of
Yeah, right.
make
No
our
one
way
plans
into
on
this
being.
industry in a little bit of
Yeah,
a windy path. So,
right.
but we're glad to have you in the industry. I know you guys are always a great support mechanism and a great group to kind of look at to see what we can learn. And that's part of why we're talking to you today. So,
Oh, thanks.
As a manager, right? I'm sure you've supervised a variety of people kind of throughout your time. When we get to this conversation around promotions or benefit increases, or hey, I just like to make more money, why do you think people are so nervous about approaching that conversation?
They definitely are, because not that many people initiate that conversation. I'll say it's really rare that people actually do ask for a promotion. So, I don't know. I think it's maybe probably a number of things. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, and probably the biggest thing is maybe not understanding your value, or really feeling that you're deserving of that, or I guess fully appreciating your value. Yeah, I don't know, but it is unusual. I haven't had many of those meetings, and would certainly welcome more.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned there, right, like knowing our worth or our value. As somebody were to look at themselves, right, how do they help to calculate that potentially, right? So if they're going to come to this kind of a conversation, are there metrics they should be looking at? Are there things that they can come to that conversation with that maybe make that easier to begin to bring up?
Well, I think the way that you should really look at the conversation is it's a chance to talk about your career. It's a chance to talk about, it's just a conversation. And, it could be that you're not going to get the promotion. It could be that you do get the promotion, but either way, that conversation is going to be productive, and it's an opportunity to learn something from it. If I'm thinking about preparing, or what a person might do to, kind of prepare for it, I would spend some time thinking about, why you're deserving of the promotion. And really practice how you're going to approach it. A distinction as well is I kind of think of it as there's two types of promotions. There's the type of promotion where it's more of just compensation adjustments that occur over time. Right now we're going through a period of inflation. Cost of living is going up, and so compensation adjustments are probably pretty natural right now. So, if you've been doing your job and performing your job adequately for the last 2 years or the last year, and you haven't had a compensation adjustment, that could be cause for a conversation. And you could kind of frame, that talk more around like a timeline. Like, I haven't had a promotion in 2 years. I've been fulfilling my obligation and really exceeding expectations with what I'm doing. Could we talk about a promotion, or what we might be able to get for promotion? The other type of promotion, I think, would be one where you're looking to advance your career. So let's say you're, working as a coordinator and you want to get to a manager, or whatever the case may be. You're managing committees and you'd like to, have a pathway to become executive director, whatever it may be. That's kind of a different conversation, but they're both the same in that, you should really think about your value, think of your accomplishments, and talk to the decision maker about this rather than your coworkers. What I see more commonly than the promotion talk is like people talking to their peers in the office about how they feel like they're undercompensated, or feeling like that's not helpful. If you're just like gossiping amongst peers and that kind of thing, you're really not doing yourself justice. If you're interested in a promotion, talk to the decision maker and really practice how you're going to approach it. And yeah, just be ready for either way. Well, I'll kind of leave it at that for now.
No worries. I think that's great. And I like that there's kind of that split, right? They both start with a conversation, but I'm kind of thinking, as I'm wrapping my mind around what you're saying, right? The end goal in some of these is different, right? So if I'm looking for a higher salary, or maybe some increased benefits or something else that I need from the position, that could potentially be kind of cut and dry. Either the organization can support it or they can't, right? Even if you've got all the data that supports maybe what you want, right? But if you're on that career conversation, I think that allows for an employer to start to potentially help dream and design that path for you as well, right? To start to have some conversations about, okay, I know this person's interested. What could that look like in a year, in 2 years? And I think recognizing maybe a promotion is not always going to happen tomorrow, right? Like you're not going to walk into a meeting and say, I would now like to be the executive director. And then the current executive director is not going to say, here you go.
Right. Yeah.
It's your time. Right. But to understand that maybe there's a roadmap that can be designed.
Yeah. And I think when you're approaching, like, what I love to hear from someone, if we are having that conversation, is that they're happy with their job. They like the organization. They like the work that they're doing. They feel like they're succeeding. And, this is something that they're looking for as a way of staying longer with the organization. Like, I guess lead with your happiness and that you're content with your job. And this is just something that you would like to talk about,
So as we think about that fear that somebody has to even begin these, and I would agree, I think part of what you said, right, is that these conversations don't happen often, right? And I think there's this moment of we're all fearful of it, and so none of us do it. And so then we don't hear anybody who has these conversations and is successful in them. So then we're even more nervous about asking for them, right? Because it just kind of feels out of the norm. But as we think about how to get over that, right, how to get over that fear, are there any tips that you can kind of know, or maybe you've even used yourself in the past to kind of come to those conversations?
Well, I mean, I think just knowing that it is a difficult conversation and that there's a chance that there's a good reason why the answer could be no. I mean, in a nonprofit, you've got money in and you've got money going out. And a lot of nonprofits, aren't building reserves, or, maybe their budget is a, net zero at the end of the year. So there could be budgetary reasons why right now we can't give you a promotion. So understanding that there could be good reasons, but it's an opportunity to learn from it, kind of makes it a little bit easier to have that conversation, So if you get a yes, or if you get like some guidance on, well, if we can accomplish these two things, or, whatever, then maybe that's where we get to the point of promotion, then that's a positive outcome. But you should also view it equally positive if you get a no, because then you can kind of ask why, learn more, try to figure that out. And then, let's say it is if the issue is revenue. So, the issue is that right now the organization isn't making enough revenue, so we can't give you a promotion right now. All right, well, now I understand what you're dealing with. Now I understand what the barrier is to my promotion. Can I help figure out how we can generate more revenue so that, we're all happy? So that's a success. Should be a successful outcome. If you're, truly happy with the job and you want to stay there. It's difficult. It's hard to take. It's easy to take rejection personally, but this is not personal. It's business.
Yeah.
So it can't. You really shouldn't take a no as a personal failure. It's just it really is just business.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting piece too around it's just business, right? Because at the end of the day, associations are businesses, and I think especially at the entry level, maybe side of a lot of associations, I think that's not always immediately understood, right? I think it's seen as like, look at all the programs we do, look at all the resources we have, look at all these things that are here. What's, I don't even know, X percentage of an increase or, a promotion for me. I don't understand how that is this big impact, and I think that to break it down onto the other side of, well, as a business, here's all the other things that are in place and here's how that impacts us, and, trying to figure out how to balance those things. Cause it is, right? I mean, especially whether you've got a small staff or a large staff, I think associations' number one expenditures typically are people, right? Yeah. People are expensive, and not for a bad reason. I mean, we all do good work, but that work doesn't come free, right? And so I think that that's a key piece to just kind of keep in the back of their minds. So you mentioned you view these conversations as an opportunity to keep somebody at the company or the association for a longer term, right? And so my hope is that also helps people view these conversations as an easier way to enter them as well. Should somebody come with their own kind of roadmap as to what they think? I'd like to maybe be, I'm a coordinator. I'd like to be a director. I'd like to be a manager in the next 3 years, or what's that look like?
Yeah.
Should they do that?
Absolutely. I mean, so a lot of times, I mean, I just recently had this conversation with one of our employees, but there's nothing that I want more than to find out what people aspire to be. Like, I'm hoping that they don't want to stay stagnant in the position that they're at. I'd like to know where they're shooting for. But, a lot of times when you ask, and this conversation, if you're having this kind of conversation with your employer, it's likely that the question could come up, well, where do you want to go in the organization? So that's one of the things, if you're preparing for this conversation, that you should really think about ahead of time. And don't be afraid to shoot for the stars. Like, I would love to know that a person wants to be, an executive director of the organization. If they want to replace me at some point, that's fine. Whatever that is, I'm interested. Like, I want to know what people really want to do, because if you find that out, then you can kind of start thinking about, all right, if that's your goal, if that's where you want to get to, here's kind of the roadmap of how you can do that. And, we as employers have to build out those pathways. We have to kind of create those checkpoints and those steps that people can take so that they can advance their career. But, if you ask a person what they want to do and they're like, I don't know, then, and it's in the promotion talk, that doesn't really bode very well for you getting that promotion. We want to retain employees, but we really want people who are kind of driven to grow, driven to take on more and evolve.
Yeah, I think that's right. We're looking for that intrinsic value of wanting the promotion and not just wanting the promotion. And I think I see that sometimes, right? Some folks I see my peers with higher titles. I see, as I look out at jobs, maybe I see higher salaries. And so I just want that, right? I just want what that is, versus really seeing what that does for my career or what that does for my personal growth in a role. Yeah. So I think that I would agree. I think that's really important to kind of be thinking about.
And I think that it's good really to think about where you started with, in this conversation. This is kind of like a tightrope, but you kind of want to think about how you came into the organization and maybe what your skill set was as an entry-level employee, or let's say at the last pay increase that you had, where were you at and where are you at now? How have you added value to your organization? How have you evolved as an employee? Like, how are you more efficient? How are you helping your executive director to have more time? All those things are good to know. But the tightrope is that, do you lead with that and ask for more money? Because that can be a real put off, kind of a turn off. So just kind of understanding your value in that conversation and your contributions, I think, is important. If nothing else, it gives you the confidence, and it may come up. You may have the chance to kind of talk about the value and that you brought the organization.
For these conversations, do you recommend that it is, is it just brought up in like a typical one-on-one, or is this hey, I'd like to schedule some additional time to meet and do you say what you want to talk about, or is it just like, I just want to have a meeting and then kind of, drop the bomb?
I was thinking about that earlier, and I think a lot of that probably depends on your manager or that decision maker. How do they process information? Are they going to be good if you maybe put them on the spot in like a quarterly check-in or an annual review, or is that something that would be better to do over lunch and just bring up randomly? Or for me, like, what I would appreciate is more of a scheduled meeting and knowing what we're going to talk about coming into it. Like, I wanted to have a conversation about how my career is going to advance in the future, and some thoughts I have around that. Then I'm going to kind of think about that as well. And so then at least I would appreciate that, just because I know what I'm walking into. But you can, I think it's fine to bring it up in some type of a review or quarterly check-in or some kind of thing that's scheduled as well.
Yeah, I would guess it would probably have a different take as well based on what your ultimate goal is, right? If you're looking to
right.
have that promotion and kind of career trajectory conversation, I'm guessing it's probably more advantageous to have that secondary meeting and schedule it and like, hey, I want to discuss what this could look like. I think when it comes to maybe the salary or benefit kind of conversation, maybe that is, hey, something I've been, at the end of the check-in, something I've been thinking about recently is this, can we talk about it at our next time, and what's potentially possible. So,
Nick, it's probably two different approaches too. Like let's say if you're an association manager and you're just wanting to meet about a compensation adjustment, maybe it's been a year or a year and a half, since you've had a compensation adjustment and you feel like it's time to have that talk. I think in that kind of meeting, it's more appropriate to, maybe lead with, I'm really happy with my job. I believe in the organization. I believe I live by our mission and our values. And I hope that I'm going to be a long-term employee for the organization. Since starting, I feel like I've gotten a lot better at my job. I've taken on more responsibility. And, I wanted to talk to you about, about a wage increase because it has been a year and a half since my wage has been increased. How do you as my employer feel about that? I think that's appropriate for that. If you're really wanting to look at a promotion and maybe a jump in title or responsibility, then it's a little different and maybe it should be framed a little differently.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there, this has kind of got my mind thinking again around the kind of the two pathways. Are there questions somebody should ask themselves when they're thinking about these conversations to help them identify kind of what's important in a role? Because I talked about at the beginning, right? Like we get that there are other roles, other jobs, right? That somebody could move to. We know other folks are hiring, and we talked, right? Every industry is experiencing kind of what this looks like. Are there reflection questions though that somebody could ask of, is this, regardless of where this conversation goes internally, maybe my values now say that I need to be somewhere else, or maybe my values now say I need to be here. I don't know if that question's making sense, but just something that helps me understand and approach that conversation a little more from my own perspective.
Yeah, I think it does. I think, right now it is a really competitive market in every industry. All employers are struggling to recruit and retain quality employees. So it's really up to that employer to have those conversations and to really meet the people where they are and to show them, give them hope and give them a direction of where they can go. So I don't know if I'm answering that question, but if you're having that conversation and the employer isn't giving you that vision or isn't really answering your questions, number one, you should really be in that moment, because you might, it might be that you're just catching him or her off guard. And, you're having a conversation about wage increase and maybe they just weren't prepared for it. So in that case, I would just, maybe ask more questions or think about those questions going into the meeting. Like, I guess the kind of questions that you might want to ask, or if I can't get a pay increase right now, I completely understand. What are some things that I could do to, earn this pay increase in 6 months, or what kind of timeline do you think that I might be able to earn that pay increase? And then if they say, 6 months or 3 months or whatever, mark that on your calendar and make sure that you're following up and
get that in writing.
Or if they go a different direction and they let's say they say, well, right now you're performing satisfactorily. You're meeting our expectations. I don't think you're exceeding our expectations. So right now, a pay increase isn't warranted, or whatever it may be. Then, as opposed to having your feelings hurt and taking that personal, that's where you can ask more questions. So, specifically, what are some areas that I can improve in? Do you mind if we check in every, I'm going to start putting an action plan together on my own so that I'm improving in these areas. But I'd like to check in with you in a month and see if you feel like I've improved in these areas. And then you have that conversation in a month and you find out that you have been improving. Well, all right, so where are we now?
Yeah.
but either way, I think just try to learn as much as you can in that meeting, and really be open to what you're hearing.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll kind of pivot here a little bit so we've maybe had the conversation, and we'll hit both sides of this, right? So we'll do the first one on the negative side, which is, okay, so I asked for a promotion, or I asked for a pay increase, and we've talked a little bit of the pay increase one, but maybe we'll hit on more on the promotion one. But I asked for it. Maybe we went through all the conversations, multiple meetings, et cetera, and I didn't get it. What should I do, right? How do I react to that? How do I approach things, in the coming months if I don't get that?
Yeah, I think it's tough. It kind of goes back to what I was saying about it. The natural instinct is to take that kind of personally, like, what? Like, I'm not getting the promotion. I feel like I've been, working my ass off here. Why am I not getting this promotion? But, knowing that it's not personal, it is business, then if you're able to kind of keep that mindset in the conversation, then figure out what that business reason is for not getting that promotion. I know this sounds weird, but it could help you kind of with the employer. Be thankful for the rejection and the feedback. Like, I understand that you're in a hard spot, and I understand that there are business reasons why I may not be able to get this promotion, but can you help me understand why a little bit more? Like, I'd like to learn a little bit more about why I'm not able to get the promotion now, and what I can do to, get to the point of getting this promotion.
Mm-hmm.
It's important to me. It's important to my family, in my career progression, that that we're working towards this. So what can I do to kind of advance this? Work on the language, but I think that's why you don't want to go into this meeting and wing it. Like, really be prepared for all these different scenarios, and think about what's going to happen if you do get that no, and then some. I mean, I would immediately just be thankful, and then try to find out more. And empathize with the employer. Like, you're in a hard spot, and I get that there's reasons.
Yeah.
But, what can we do together to figure this out in the future?
Yeah, I like that approach, because I would agree, right? I don't know that anybody's first response to a rejection is going to be, thank you so much.
Right, I know, but that'll really play well if you do.
I agree. And I think it's an important one, right? Like, again, it's kind of a thank you for even having this conversation, right? Because at some level they don't have to.
Right.
And so it's nice to at least say, like, we were open to it. Unfortunately, just right now, it just doesn't make sense. And I like your comment there too about really getting, I think, again, some tangible reasons as to why I can't get that. I mean, your example again earlier of, okay, well, if it's revenue based, if I generate more revenue, right, what can I potentially get from that? But also, if it's just other job performance pieces of, or I want to see you build a new product or a new program, or, because that's, if we're looking at coordinator to manager level, right? Like, I'm looking for somebody who now doesn't just manage or, runs a program. It's you're building it and deciding things that run. I want to see something like that from you, right? And then we know you're ready for that next step. And, that at least then gives, I think, hopefully an employee kind of that runway to do something, right? And they recognize, like, now it's back in my court, and these are the things I have to kind of prove, right? To make that. On the other side of that, you ask for the promotion, you ask for the pay raise, and you get it. Yeah. What does somebody do after that, right? Like, what are some of the best practices that they could have after getting something like that? Do they change their approach to work in any way? I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are on that.
And that kind of depends on the two different categories of promotion as well. Like, is it just an overdue? If it's either way, you should be thankful. Sure. I mean, number one, well, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with me. Remind them that you're committed to the organization, to the mission, and that you're going to continue to, work hard and help advance the organization. If it's keeping in the same position and it's more of an adjustment in compensation, I don't think there's a ton that you need to do other than be thankful. You might send a thank you note, appreciation of taking the time to meet, and continue to add value and continue to grow as an employee. On the other side, that's a little more tricky. Like if you're asking for a career advancement, and the next step is, all right, let's put together a plan so that we are beginning to advance your career. Then you really have to start laying out steps. I would work with your supervisor, maybe set a working meeting where you can start planning some milestones. Like, all right, what are the major milestones for my next year look like?
Mm-hmm.
And if you got those major milestones, then you start adding some of those tasks and those to-dos to achieve those milestones. But having a clear and agreed upon expectation between you and your employer about what you're going to accomplish with this promotion, I think would be appreciated and would probably open you up for more promotions beyond what you've just received.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think the key thing there, right, just being thankful either way. That a conversation's been had, and then, and I don't think this is meant to, I hope listeners aren't hearing this as like, just be, always be thankful for literally anything an employer gives you. But I think it's this stance that, again, these are difficult conversations for you to have. And they're also difficult conversations for an employer, right? Both sides of the equation can be hard. And so I think it's just recognizing, right, the difficulty of bringing this kind of a conversation, to the table. Can be hard.
And, every employer is just going to handle it differently. I mean, some people need time to process it. I mean, they may need a follow-up meeting, or you're catching them so off guard that they just don't know how to respond, and maybe they respond inappropriately, or whatever. But either way, if you can kind of give your employer a little bit of grace, but only if you can figure out how you're going to get, you want a promotion. So one way or another, you need some clarification on how you can get there.
Yeah.
If you don't get that clarification, if you don't get any guidance on how you're ever going to get a promotion, like at that point, you might start looking for alternative jobs.
Right.
But if you really have that meeting and a good conversation about what it's going to take, it's going to be a win either way.
Yeah, I agree. Any, as you think back to your own professional career, I don't know if you've ever been in a position where you asked for something like this. Just any advice maybe now from the seat that you're sitting in that you would have given yourself back then?
As I'm thinking about, the boss or the supervisor that may not know what to do, I'm kind of reminded of my parents and, of my childhood. And one of the cool things that they did with my sister and I both were, they were very humble, and they were very quick to acknowledge that they may not always have the right answer, or they may not always know what the best solution to a problem is, but that they were doing their best. And that's something that I've kind of grown to appreciate more, I guess, the older I got, and certainly the tack that I take with my kids. But we as parents have to make decisions. I can't leave it up to my 5-year-old to make all of our family's decisions. We have to make decisions, and some of those decisions are better than others. And so as you're having these conversations with your managers, with your coworkers, with your executive director, whoever it may be, I think we just, need to keep in mind that we're all just people, and, your managers, your supervisors, they're doing their best. And in the context of this conversation, just try to be in the moment, and to really understand where they're coming from, and to get the most out of that conversation. And, give them a little bit of grace if things do get bumpy, or if they don't say the exact right thing in the moment. Make sure that you value yourself. Like if I think about, maybe early on in my career, and by early on, I say like any year before 30, I think I had this, this stigma about me of, well, I'm the young guy, and the people that are over 30, sure, they should be making more money because they're over 30. I mean, they look older, they've got more respect in the industry, and that kind of thing. And, that's not true. That's not the way employers should think about it, or employees should think about it. So, truly value yourself, and don't think about your age as a obstacle to advancing your career. You can do anything you want, but you need to not be afraid to have these conversations, and truly not be afraid of rejection. Because, like, let's say I'm a 24-year-old, and I'm driven to advance my career, don't be afraid to tell them now, like, hey, I'd like to eventually do this.
Yeah.
And anything that you can do to give me more skills or training so that I can accomplish this in my career would be really appreciated. The thing that my 24-year-old self wouldn't have understood was that managers never hear that. We never get someone coming to us about how to really advance their career. It's rare. And when you do, it's really special, and you really want to help be that mentor, help be that coach, help that person to achieve their goals, because your managers and the executive directors, they didn't get there by not having people help them. So people naturally want to pay it forward. And so I don't know, if I were to look back, I would say that that's probably the thing that I didn't fully appreciate or understand, like in my 20s.
Yeah. I mean, so what I pull from that, especially, right, is be vocal, right? Like actually share those things that you're thinking about, because as a manager myself, and who's managed teams in the past, is this conversation of like, yeah, if I know that that's of an interest for you, I can start to match experiences and opportunities in a much better way. I'm not going to say I'm going to take away some of the things you don't like to do, right, in your current role, but I can say, hey, there's this opportunity to serve on a committee, or there's this opportunity to spearhead this new task force, or right, like there's all these things that I can now actually start to connect you to in a way that I can't if I don't know that that's of an interest for you, right? And then that opportunity is either going to stay at my level, or it's going to go to somebody else on the team. And so I think, always share that information.
Nick, something else that I think is really important for people, and that I kind of learned more in my 30s was, the value of having a peer network. And, having a peer network with your coworkers can be helpful, but I think it's more helpful to have a peer network of people outside of your organization. So let's say you're involved. I mean, ISAE is a great place.
I was going to say, and what a great plug for ISAE.
Truly, that is certainly one place where you could develop that peer network. Another place would be like the national organization that serves your organization, because then you're really talking apples to apples, and just try to establish those friendships, picking up the phone and talking to people when you're about to have this promotion conversation, like who's your peer in Georgia who you talk to at the annual conference, who you think might help advise you on this. And, just kind of look at the people that, you want to surround yourself by quality people. So those advisors that you can kind of develop, or that peer network through these organizations, you want to find the people that will really complement you the best. And I would just never be afraid to pick up the phone and talk to them and seek out their advice as well. Getting advice from your coworker in your organization, it could be taken the wrong way. It's not as helpful as someone outside.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Especially, I mean, just tapping into those networks is huge. I've had some good opportunities to be at conferences or things like that where I've met, a variety of folks who do what I do. And I have a core group of people now that I can reach out to have some of these more difficult conversations to say, like, if I say this, how do I approach it? Or, we've had conversations the other way, right? As the supervisor to the supervisee, they've brought this up. How would you respond? And so I would agree. Those are great opportunities to maximize the networks that we can develop. So lean into those for sure.
Yeah, right. Yeah, definitely.
Well, this has been a great conversation. I'm sure we could talk about this all day. Lots of little nuances and little discussions and whatnot. But is there kind of a singular piece of advice that you want to leave our listeners with today?
Oh, it's tough. I mean, just believe in yourself, value yourself, and don't be afraid to have those difficult conversations, and to know that whatever the result of that kind of conversation, the only thing that can come out of it is something positive. Either way. So that's why you shouldn't be afraid to speak up and have those conversations.
Love that. It's a great way to end this. Well, Chris, thank you for being with us today. Like I said, I really appreciate this conversation. I think it's one, as you mentioned, we're not having that often. And so hopefully this helps to spur some folks to have some more candid conversations. If folks are interested in maybe tapping into more of your knowledge, how can they find you on the internet? How can they reach you?
Well, thank you for giving me the chance. This was kind of a good opportunity for me to kind of think in a different way about this. So I enjoyed it. But yeah, I'm happy to talk with anyone, about this. My email is cprice@mattisoncorp.com, or our phone number is 317-686-2670. But yeah, feel free to reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn as well.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode of You Should Hear This. If you have any questions you'd like answered or future topics you'd like us to explore, please send us an email at info@isae.org.